Hi, everyone. It's your favorite MLB newsbreaker, Bob Nightingale, and you're listening to the Lollygaggers Dynasty Recap. Enjoy the show, and thank God for Jeffrey Springs.
Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lollygaggers Dynasty Recap. I am your host, Zang. I'll be running a solo show today, recapping week number 6, as we are getting right into the meat of this Dynasty season. The standings, I looked at them after this week, and I am really looking forward to the rest of the season. I'm really looking forward to see how things work out. It definitely looked early on like we kind of had a sort of a bigger spread of teams, and things have tightened up quite a bit. Injury bug has hit a lot of us. I know we're all kind of feeling that IL's swelling up and noticing how shallow perhaps the waiver wire and everything is. So it is, I think, going to be a really fun rest of the season coming up. But this week was, I have to say, one of the best we've had in a while. Some really close matchups, unbelievable Sunday finishes on a couple matchups here, and just a lot of really fun stuff. So we will start off with our first matchup of the week. It's the Joinville-friendly Capybaras going up against the North Pole Natty Bows. Things started off very well in Joinville on Monday night. Ranger Suarez put up 47 points in what was his best outing of the season so far. Over on the other side, Moises Ballesteros, waiver claim by Natty Bows. He put up 13 points, but Dennis Santana's minus 18 did put a bit of a damper on that day as Joinville took an 80-38 lead. Tuesday was an explosive day on both sides as we saw 139 points scored by Joinville and 124 by North Pole. Of course, that would be enough for Joinville to hold their lead. 11 points from Bobby Witt Jr. and 24 from Trey Savage is how they went about that. Over on the other side, it was a bigger spread. Joe Ryan with 20 points, Shohei with 21, and Shane Boz with 22, climbing the ladder there. On Wednesday, we would see Joinville hold their lead for a third day, scoring 22 points, but the 74 over on the other side from North Pole, 29 of them coming from Jamison Tyone, closed the gap quite a bit, and it would be fully closed on Thursday as Byron Buxton's 13 points and a 15-point performance from Adley Rushman would give North Pole the league as they scored 73 points to just 10 over on the other side. On Friday, it was a relatively low-scoring day for both teams, just 11 points from Byron Buxton as the sort of only standout performer really on the day. 35 points scored by Joinville, 30 by North Pole. On Saturday, North Pole held their lead for the third straight day, scoring 93 points. Christian Walker had 16, and Chris Sale with one of his best outings of the season as well, scoring 38 points. And on Friday, despite scoring just 31 points, North Pole would close out the win. Joinville scored 98, had a great day to end things off. 34 points from Chris Bubich, but unfortunately, just would not be enough to close out the gap in that lead that North Pole had taken. The Natty Bows do win the matchup as they move to 4-2, and Joinville's losing streak continues as they slide down to a 1-5 standing here. Overall, this was pretty split between the two. Joinville really had the better pitchers, and North Pole really had the better batters. In terms of total at-bats, North Pole led 293 to 229. In terms of innings pitched, Joinville led 82 to 63. Joinville also led in Ks, wins, and earned runs, obviously allowing fewer there. But North Pole really got it done in the home runs, the RBIs, some of those big counting categories. For their batters. 13 home runs and 52 RBIs on the week. 23 extra base hits as well, which is a huge number there. Also noticing just that they They had quite a bit fewer strikeouts, so just fewer of those negative points there. And North Pole just continues to chug along here, the highest scorer in the league so far. And I think they're continuing to show why this team looked like one of the best coming into the season. A few best bat and potent pitcher performers here. North Pole did have the number 2 best batter. That was Byron Buxton. He scored 53 points. And over on Joinville's side, they actually had 2 potent pitchers. Number 3, Ranger Suarez with 63 points. And number 5, Chris Bubich with an even 50. So tough week for Hideki for sure. It's never fun when you have 2 guys on those best batters or potent pitcher lists and then aren't able to get a win out of it. But they kept it relatively close. Just 23 points separated the 2 of them, and hopefully the friendly capybaras can turn things around as we move into week 7. Matchup number 2 is the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes taking on the Arizona Asphalt. It was a slow start to the week, just 17 points scored by the Coyotes and 64 over on Arizona's side. On Tuesday, we saw things pick up a little bit, 73 points scored by Southwest Kansas, so they wouldn't take the lead back as the 49 points scored by the Asphalt would be enough to hold it. Ellie De La Cruz had 19 points on that day. Fantastic year so far for the Red shortstop, and as Ace said a couple weeks ago, definitely justifying that first round pick that he was used for in our initial draft. 22 points from Davis Martin over on the other side. On Wednesday, we would see a pair of 30-point performances, 31 from Southwest Kansas and 35 from Arizona. Each had a batter scoring 11 points, Ozzie Albies over on the Coyotes side and Liam Hicks over on the Asphalt side. The big day came on Thursday, though, as we saw Southwest Kansas take the lead away as they scored 140 points. Just 35 scored over on the other side for the second day straight, but let's talk about Southwest Kansas's batters and pitchers on this day. Casey Schmidt had 14 points and Jeremiah Jackson with 16, a couple of guys, both of whom were picked up on the waiver wires at different points this season. So nice to see those guys contributing for Okie a little bit. But really, the big numbers came from the pitchers. Bryce Elder with 22 points, Bailey Ober with 24, and Lance McCullers Jr. with 28. All of that added up, as I said, to that huge 140-point day. Michael Garcia did have 16 points for the Asphalt, and Freddie Peralta with 25, but it was Mike Soroka's minus 19 that really drove down the total score on that day. Southwest Kansas would hold their lead again through Friday, scoring 78 points to just 68 over on the other side. You didn't mind 31 from Jacob Mizorowski or 31 from Shane McClanahan on Friday. But Saturday would bring Arizona another daily win, although not a chance to retake that lead. 26 points from Cater Montero contributed to the 37 total for Southwest Kansas on Saturday as they held their lead, and they would close it out on Sunday. 16 points from Michael Bush as a little cherry on top, as we did see the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes take the matchup from the Arizona Asphalt, 439 to 343, 96 points separating them, and Arizona was actually our lowest scorer this week. I think they're where we need to start. Obviously, this team started 4-0 and now has lost 2 straight weeks. This did seem like just a tough matchup for Arizona. Mizorowski obviously pulled early out of a really great start where I think he was in the midst of a no-hitter. Tough week for Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who scored just 9 points in total. And outside of Ellie De La Cruz, the bats didn't really get going. De La Cruz had that 25, and you did have 30 from Michael Garcia, but lower teen numbers for most of the rest of those bats. So just the formula that Arizona's been using to win didn't really come through this week, unfortunately. I have a feeling the team will be more than fine, though. Obviously, there are plenty of these ups and downs in fantasy, as we all know. Over on the other side, Southwest Kansas is really doing a good showing. Displaying their prowess on the waiver wire. Obviously, Lance McCullers, waiver wire guy. Cater Montero, waiver wire guy. Bailey Ober, waiver wire guy. Davis Martin, waiver wire guy. Bryce Elder, waiver wire guy. Can only say it so many times, but all of those were starting pitchers who had over 20 points scored on the week. So, Okie's really kind of putting together a pitching staff from the guys who were available. Clearly did a great job. Took away a win from one of the top teams in our league. And this win actually does have the Rabid Coyotes now sitting in the sort of second group of records at 3-3. So they've made their way back to 500 and are hopefully looking to continue that next week. Our third matchup of the day does have the St. Petersburg Tropopologists taking on the Seoul Sovereigns. It was a slow start on Monday as both teams scored 19 points. Seoul did take the lead on decimals there, but they would fully extend that lead on Tuesday, scoring 99 points, 86 scored over on the other side. Nick Martinez, this sort of becoming a theme for this episode, another waiver claim who has been fantastic for the Sovereigns. Actually, pardon me, Nick Martinez, I think, was in the roster expansion draft. But regardless, somebody picked up during the season. He has just been unbelievable for the Sovereigns all season, and he did help them take that lead on the day. Clay Holmes, who has also had a really, really great season, he scored 33 over on St. Petersburg's side. St. Pete would take the lead that Seoul held for 2 days on Wednesday as Cade Cavalli scored 26 and Tarek Skubal scored 29. Juan Soto had 12 points as well on Wednesday that contributed to the 38 total from Seoul, but Eric Orze would have minus 12, so unfortunately negating out that Mets outfielders total. Thursday was another lower scoring day for these two. 22 points from St. Pete and 31 from Seoul. St. Pete would hold the lead through this day, but on Friday, 146 points from the Sovereigns would give them the lead. A huge day on the back of Geraldo Perdomo, scored 11 points. Kazuma Okamoto, who scored 20 points, and Mitch Keller, who scored 35 points. Didn't mind 12 from Rooker over on the other side, but it was unfortunately not quite enough to hold that lead. On Saturday, we saw the second straight 100-plus day for the Sovereigns as they scored 137 points. How about that for a back-to-back? Friday, 146, Saturday, 137. Shota Imanaga had 35 points, Max Meyer had 40, and Okamoto again with 12 points this time. Connor Griffin with a really nice 16-point day for the Tropopologists, and Emerson Hancock, who we're all regretting not having on our squads, scored 38 points. On Sunday, the Tropopologists would score 134 points, 31 of them coming from Clay Holmes and 35 from Braxton Ashcraft, but it would unfortunately for St. Pete not be enough to take the win away as Seoul scored 52 points that ended up being enough for them to hold the lead as they won the matchup 523 to 483, beating the Tropopologists by 40 points. Look, the story comes down to that Friday and Saturday for the Sovereigns. Their starters, their batters, all of these people absolutely went off. Okamoto, who has been really, really hot as of late, 47 points on the week. Has definitely been, I think, a big boon for the Sovereigns. And Juan Soto, who obviously has come back from that injury that sidelined him early in the season, I think has been really important to this team sort of getting back on track to where they, are expected to be. No surprise to anyone, St. Pete did lead in a lot of those pitching categories. 84 innings pitched, 94 Ks to 76 and 73 over on Seoul's side. Interestingly enough, St. Pete did have quite a few more earned runs, 36 to 25. And that sort of tied in. Obviously, we know those earned runs -2 definitely hurt your total score. And Seoul, although they had fewer at-bats, fewer hits, fewer runs scored, they had more home runs, more RBIs, more walks, and fewer strikeouts. So a lot of those categories where things really start to rack up, we did see Seoul kind of take the lead in that respect. We do talk about how often it is a pitching-led league, and we're seeing the teams with better pitching often winning matchups. This isn't necessarily one of those cases. St. Petersburg definitely outpitched Seoul, but the Sovereigns did it with the bats, and obviously didn't have too bad of pitching performances either. 3 different guys with 35, Imanaga, Keller, and Martinez, all 3, and then Max Meyer with 40 points. So great work from the Sovereigns, and unfortunately a little bit of a stop to the winning streak from the Tropopologists, but they are sitting now at 2-4 with the Sovereigns in our top group at 4-2. For matchup number 4, we will see the Portland Pioneers take on the Valley Gift Lords. Things opened up with a lead for the Valley as they scored 56 points to just 42 over on Portland's side, 13 from Munetaka Murakami and 23 from Jack Kahanowitz. Over on Portland's side, we did see 15 points scored by Cody Clemens, and we saw a lead taken over on Tuesday. Valley had the lead on Wednesday. Portland took it over on Tuesday with a 40-point day, -1 from the Valley in total on that day. No batters or pitchers in particular really stood out for either one of those groups. But on Wednesday, we would see the Valley take a pretty sizable lead as they scored 128 points to 73 over on Portland's side. It was a disappointing day for the pitchers who play for the Pioneers, but on the Valley side, we saw 28 points from Taj Bradley and 29 from Andre Palante. 10 points from James Wood didn't hurt either. On Thursday, we would see the fourth lead change of the matchup as 10 points from Bryce Terang and 12 from Shea Langoliers would help Portland take the lead back from the Valley as they scored just 21 points on that day. The fifth lead change of the matchup would happen on Friday as the Valley scored 77 points to just 44 over on Portland's side. 10 of those 77 came from Colson Montgomery, with Munetaka Murakami again putting up another 12 as he hit another home run. For the first time all matchup, we would see a team hold their lead through the next day as the 80 points from Portland were not enough to keep the ping pong lead game going. 111 scored by the Gift Lords, 26 of them coming from Kyle Harrison, 28 from Michael McGreevy, and 34 from Sean Burke. Wasn't a bad day over in Portland, 18 from Shea Langoliers and 27 from Dylan Cease. But in the end, it would not be enough. 24 points from Justin Wrobleski did not hurt for the Pioneers, but the 17 points scored by the Valley on that final day, 10 of them coming from Tyler Soderstrom, did end up being just enough to hold off the Pioneers' comeback. The Valley Gift Lords win 417 to 408. The Gift Lords were our lowest scoring winner of the week, but they managed to win by 9 points. And in the end, that's what matters. That Tyler Soderstrom home run was what sort of ended up doing in the Pioneers in the end. Couple tough minuses on the pitching side as well, but really the story is poor starts for the Pioneers. Brandon Woodruff got pulled from his start early. Jack Flaherty had just a dreadful week, scoring only 2 points. Bubba Chandler had a tough week as well. And Peyton Tolley, after his really good debut on the season, had a bit of a tough one against the Astros in the opening game of that series. So, against the Blue Jays. So unfortunately, just a few guys pulled early from starts or tough starts just kind of sunk the Pioneers. And all credit to the Gift Lords, similarly to kind of how I mentioned earlier with Southwest Kansas. A lot of guys from either waivers or maybe people we didn't really see being major contributors this season came through and put up points. Andre Palante, Michael McGreevy, Jack Kahanowitz, Kyle Harrison, Sean Burke, Taj Bradley. All of these names put up really great performances for the Gift Lords. And I think typically, with these sort of 4 or 5 guys that you might find on the waivers or back of the rotation type guys, often, you can't really count on them to do that throughout the season, but ultimately things lined up really well for the Gift Lords, and all of those guys kind of went off this week, and they were able to pull out that win. The Gift Lords now move to 3-3, while the Pioneers are knocked down to 3-3 as well, so the two teams are tied in record. Neither one of them had a best batter or potent pitcher. It was a relatively low-scoring matchup, both of them in the low 400s, but they will both be looking to find their way above 500 next week. So we look at the hitting. Portland definitely had the advantage, 243 at-bats to 239. Portland led in walks and strikeouts, but fell behind in home runs and RBIs. I'm always keeping an eye on those extra base hits, too. 21 for Portland, 16 for the Valley. I think those extra base hits are really, really valuable. Just that, what do you want to call it? Medium ball, not small ball, but, not just home runs. I do think that those tally up pretty quickly with the total bases and, often coming with RBIs and all of that. But of course, as we mentioned, the pitching side was clearly in the advantage of the Valley. Fewer earned runs, fewer hits, more innings pitched, more Ks, more wins. That's a recipe for success, and it certainly was this week for the Gift Lords. Matchup number 5 was by far the biggest and most entertaining of the week. It was a battle between two teams right near the top of the league. The Arctic Real Survivors coming in at 3-2, going up against the Washington State Winners coming in at 4-1. Arctic took the lead on Monday, scoring 57 points, 30 of them from Max Fried, and held that lead with a 105-point performance on Tuesday. Jesus Luzardo scoring 41 for them, helped them with that lead. It was a big day over on the other side, though. Washington State scoring 80 points total, 11 each from Pete Crow Armstrong and Bo Bichette. Julio Rodriguez scored 14, and on the day he was acquired via trade, Alec Burleson scored 15. So it's a nice feeling when you get a guy, and then, he puts up big numbers on that trade day. Despite the big lead they had built, Washington State snatched it away from the Real Survivors on Wednesday, and it's hard to imagine they wouldn't, as they scored 159 points. PCA again, this time with 10 points, along with CJ Abrams, who also had 10. Alec Burleson again with 11 points. Cole Young with 13 on this day, and then a couple of great performances from the pitchers. 20 from Tomoyuki Sugano and 41 from Gavin Williams. Over on the other side, Arctic Real Survivors did have 21 points from their catcher in Hunter Goodman. But as we said, it wouldn't be enough, with that onslaught that Washington State put on. The Winners scored 83 points on Thursday, which did hold their lead. Unfortunate minus 11 from Isaac Matson, but 27 from Christopher Sanchez, 13 from CJ Abrams, and 11 from Brandon Lau would help them out with that score. Chris Bassett flipping the script and scoring 31 points. We love to see that for the Real Survivors on Thursday. On Friday, we saw another huge day from the Winners. They were really flexing sort of everything we see when they are firing on all cylinders. Brian Reynolds with 15 points. Julio Rodriguez with another 17, and Zach Wheeler with 32 as the Winners eclipsed 100 points yet again. 82 points over on the Real Survivors side did keep them in the matchup, along with their 94 on the next day. 58, however, from the Washington State Winners would be enough for the Real Survivors would be enough for the Winners to hold their lead. That Saturday, we did see a pair of Yankees in Trent Grisham and Cody Bellinger score 13 and 25 points. And over on the other side, Alec Burleson yet again, this time with 10 points, and Foster Griffin with 21 for the Winners. Sunday came along, and we saw one of the most dramatic finishes we have yet seen in the league, and certainly one of the best we've seen this season. Jesus Luzardo pitched another stellar outing, scoring 28 points for the Real Survivors. And Washington State had a pair of great starts as well, 26 points each from Logan Henderson, a recent trade acquisition, and Matthew Boyd. However, in the Orioles-Yankees matchup, Andrew Kittredge, who was claimed off of waivers this week, would record minus 20 points. It is a clear and obvious Bassett, folks. There is no way around it. The reason it was so painful is because many of those points came off a home run by Jason Dominguez, who, of course, is a member of the Real Survivors. It, in total, was a 38-point swing, and just ended up being enough to sink the Washington State Winners. A dramatic comeback by the Real Survivors, snatching the lead back on the final day, does give them their fourth win on the season, as they now pull even with the Winners at 4-2. Each of these teams had a number one for the best batters and potent pitchers list. Jesus Luzardo was the number one potent pitcher, and Alec Burleson was the number one best batter. So fun to see him obviously make a excellent contribution in his first week in Washington. Just 8 points separated these two to finish things out, 589 to 581. I know for a fact that Min actually ended up benching some guys for Sunday Night Baseball, wanting to avoid any scary negatives or anything like that. And I think potentially a Kyle Finnegan save or hold with a couple of strikeouts might have closed the gap enough, but did not end up being the case as Detroit kind of blew out Texas there. So Washington State, now similarly to the Asphalt, after winning 4 straight, has now lost 2 straight. So we'll certainly be looking to get back on track next week. This one had a few superlatives to it. It was the closest matchup with just 8 points separating the two of them. It was also the most points in a loss. Obviously, 581 was the most points in a loss by far. And it also held the highest scorer of the week with 589. It actually held the 2 highest scorers of the week. I'm quickly checking my math. 2 of just 3 people to eclipse 500 points this week, and the other one was in the 520s. So this matchup was by far and away the highest scoring, well above, and Min and the Arctic Real Survivors end up coming out on top. Let's quickly take a look at some of the statistics. The winners certainly led in batting, leading in RBIs, walks, and runs scored. Not a bad showing on the Real Survivors side. They did lead with fewer strikeouts and did have more singles as well. But the pitching side is really where we saw the Real Survivors. You know Ace's mantra, and I'm going to bring it back up here. 80 innings pitched to 77, 78 Ks to 73, 8 wins to 4 wins, and just 33 earned runs to 36. So, the Real Survivors just pulled this out. The other thing I'm keeping an eye on are the holds. Obviously, we all love saves. They're worth 5 points, but holds worth 4. Not, anything to sneeze at there. And it was 9-4 for the Real Survivors to Washington State winners there. So it does look like Min is getting a lot out of his bullpen with, sort of setup guys and stuff like that. Overall, it was a team win. Nobody above 30, other than Cody Bellinger. Pardon me, he was the one above 30 in the hitting room, but a lot of guys in those low 20s, high teens. And then the pitching staff, just stellar performances. Obviously, as we mentioned, Jesus Luzardo was great. But Max Fried as well with 44 points was pretty close to making the potent pitchers list. Nothing bad on the other side for the winners. Julio does seem to be heating up. He had 36 points this week, and Brian Reynolds, who the now seemingly ill-fated Cody Bellinger trade did include Brian Reynolds, so he has certainly been a bright spot in that for Mike and Alec Burleson, who has come over and received the Mike magic touch. He seems to have turned into a super slugger at the first base position now. Matchup number 6 would see the Cuyahoga Black Panthers take on the Sault Ste. Marie Locks. They entered the week at 2-3 and 1-4. We would see Sault Ste. Marie take the lead on Monday, scoring 58 points, 20 of them coming from Steven Matz. And on Cuyahoga's side, 25 points came from Parker Messick, hometown guy in Cleveland. However, Cuyahoga scored just 29 points on that day, and in part that was because another Cleveland Guardian, Hunter Gaddis, scored -11 on the day for them. Sault Ste. Marie held the lead through Tuesday, scoring 43 points, and again through Wednesday as they scored 40 points. But Cuyahoga did start to close the gap a bit as they scored 67 on that day. Matt Shaw with 14 and Nate Evaldi with 36. Cuyahoga would take the lead on Thursday, scoring 117 points to just 38 over on Sault Ste. Marie's side. Andrew Abbott had 24 points, Framber Valdez had 25, and Logan Webb had 26 as they climbed the ladder there with some starters. It was the opposite kind of starter luck over on the other side as Sault Ste. Marie had Brandon Young score -12, knocking down an already relatively low-scoring day. On Friday, we saw 73 points by Cuyahoga and 64 by the Locks. The Locks did have Bryson Stott score 14 points and Noah Schultz score 27. Cuyahoga got 12 from Pete Alonso as they did hold that lead. The same would be true on Saturday as they held, scoring 88 points to 78 over on the other side. Ian Happ with a big day having 18 and Seth Lugo with a nice start scoring 21. Sault Ste. Marie Locks had Dylan Dingler score 12 points for them as a part of their 78 total. Despite scoring 100 points on Sunday, Sault Ste. Marie would not be able to overcome the deficit that had been built up throughout the week. Cuyahoga scored 60 on that day, 22 of them coming from Tyler Malley. Over on the other side, Bryson Stott again with 13 points this time, and Aaron Savali with 22. Obviously contributed to that nice 114 points from Sault Ste. Marie, but it would not be enough, as I mentioned before. 472 points for Cuyahoga, 439 for Sault Ste. Marie, as 33 points separated the two of them. Overall, I think this matchup, we kind of saw a bit of a slow start. That happened, I think, in a number of matchups this week. There were some teams that I think had Monday off, so then the series, starts Tuesday, and things are all kind of messed up. This, I think, is when I sort of look at the stats for this matchup, it's a little bit of an exercise of quality versus quantity, where we do see Sault Ste. Marie, who led in both at-bats and innings pitched, but unfortunately didn't lead in a number of the key categories like RBIs, strikeouts, Ks for pitchers, earned runs, hits allowed for pitchers, walks for pitchers, runs scored, home runs. So Sault Ste. Marie definitely has, I think, a lot of guys that are out there. They're getting a lot of at-bats. They're pitching a lot of innings. And unfortunately this week, those things were just not of the quality that I think KJ would typically like to see. Cuyahoga had a nice week too. Ian Happ has been really nice since coming over. Let me take a quick look at how he made his way over here. I know it was in a trade recently. Yeah, this was one right at the beginning of the season in March. We saw Ian Happ come over from Arizona for Erod and Elliot Ramos along with a second-round pick. So he's been great for Cuyahoga early on, and obviously, we know Alonzo is going to be great. He had a 40-point week, and Nate Eovaldi, who I do believe struggled a little bit out of the gate since being traded over, has definitely righted the ship since then. I think both of these teams who, let's see, the Sault Ste. Marie is now sitting at 1-5, and the Black Panthers are sitting at 3-3. So both of them will be looking to obviously continue next week. Sault Ste. Marie going up in sort of an interesting matchup. We'll get to that when we get to the transaction tracker. But it should be interesting to see how all of that works out. Finishing out our matchup minute, we do have the headlining matchup for the week. It was the Fenton Melonheads taking on the Bronx Bandoleros. As I said last week, yes, Fenton came in 4-1. Yes, Bronx came in 1-4. I still think this is going to be a good matchup, and boy, did it live up to the billing. Things started relatively slow with inverse score lines on Monday. Bronx scored 54. Fenton scored 45. In the Bronx, those 54 points came from Aaron Judge, who scored 15, and then Connor Prelip, who was actually a waiver claim from that day. He tallied up 21. We saw just under 100 points scored in Fenton on Tuesday. Nolan Gorman putting up 11 and Jake DeGrom with 25, but the Bronx would eclipse that century mark, scoring 111 points. Chase Burns with 27 and Cam Schlittler with 34. Look at that. Look at me with the self-control. On Wednesday, we saw a much lower scoring day for the two teams. 19 for Fenton, 13 for the Bronx. Fenton's score would have been higher if not for a minus 12 from Kenley, who has had a rough start to the season after a pretty good last year in Anaheim. On Thursday, we would see a trio of players make up most of the 66 points for Fenton. Big days for Isak Paredes, JJ Weatherholt, and Kyle Schwarber as they put up 11, 13, and 28 points. Over on the other side, we did have William Contreras score 21 points as the Bronx scored 55 and held their lead. This was the day they were kind of joking around in the Discord about the battle of the utility player spots. Schwarber, of course, scoring 28 and William Contreras scoring 21. So obviously pretty entertaining to see those two both eclipse 20 points as batters. On Friday, despite scoring 62 points from Matt Olson, 12 from Matt Olson, he didn't have 62, 12 from Matt Olson and 20 from Robbie Ray, 134 points would let the Bronx hold their lead and extend it to a point where it looked like it was going to be tough for Fenton. On Saturday, Fenton had a number of starters going, but unfortunately the results were just not there. Connolly Early had a -3 and Rhett Lauder had a -21. It was offset a little bit by 17 points from Drake Baldwin, but over on the other side, Jordan Walker scoring 10 and Ryan Weathers scoring 21 would be more than enough for the Bronx, and they would close things out going wire to wire, as on Sunday they scored 32 points, 12 of them coming from Ben Rice. So although this was not a terribly close matchup, it was the biggest blowout, 490 to 393, 97 points separating the two of them. Obviously, a couple of high-scoring teams with some really big, performances from the batters and some, tough ones as well from the pitchers. Each of these teams had a player on the best bats and potent pitchers list. Number 5 on the best bats list was Matt Olson, and number 4 on the potent pitchers list was Chase Burns. Burns scored 62 and Olson scored 47. It's happening, folks. I told you. The Bronx are finding their rhythm. We all knew it was going to happen. No one really thought this was going to be who they were for this, rest of the season. But it does seem like JMC's team has figured out who they are. They led in nearly every pitching category outside of saves. Fenton had 6 saves and the Bronx had just 1. Bronx also had more hit by pitches and wild pitches, 2 and 1 respectively. But other than that, they led or tied, I should say, in every single category. 62 innings pitched, 68 Ks, 5 wins, 3 losses, 21 earned runs, 42 hits, 21 walks. It was a stellar week for the pitching department. If you were wearing a Bandoleros uniform. It was a big week for the bats as well, frankly, for both teams, but I will highlight Fenton a little bit here. 29 extra base hits. Again, I mentioned I love those extra base hits. 29 to 21 over on the other side. They did tally a few more strikeouts, 67 to 56. Of course, you're going to get that with some guys like Schwarber I guess I shouldn't say Jordan. Schwarber and probably Matt Olson is another good name in there. A couple guys that'll strike out a little bit, but they will also bring the home runs, and you see that, and that's kind of where I was going with this. 13 home runs on the week for Fenton. Look, the big guys did their thing. Weatherholt, 43. Boy, has he been good to start the year. Unfortunately, Schwarber's really only good day was that 28-point day. He scored just 28 points on the week. Pretty nasty strikeout streak for him that he ended today. And then, of course, Matt Olson, as we mentioned, with the 47. Pitchers just didn't quite come through for the Melonheads, and they did for the Bronx. And in the end, that kind of ended up being the deciding factor. Schlittler and Warren, 34 points each for the Yankees starters, were really helpful for the Bandoleros. And Chase Burns, who just continues to do the thing. He's been pretty good to start the year and has been trending more and more up over the past few weeks. So he did, if I'm looking at this correctly, I think he actually sat today, unless I'm mistaken. It looks like the Bandoleros did run out of starts as I'm looking at the roster now. So Chase Burns likely would have been on the potent pitchers. Pardon me, he was on the potent pitchers list, although it was not one. I'm a little mixed up this week, folks. I'm not going to lie. I was rushed a little bit putting together notes. So Chase Burns, although he was one of the highest pitchers for the week, did not actually end up on that list. Let's see who would be replacing him. Let's take a quick gander as we dive in. I did do things a little bit differently as I put some things together differently than I normally do. We'll quickly slide over to pitchers. Of course, as I mentioned, Chris Burns wouldn't be on there. So Steven Matz from Sault Ste. Marie with his 48 points will be replacing Burns as the number 5 on the potent pitchers list. Thanks for sitting with me there as I dug through stats and for understanding when I make mistakes. As I mentioned, look, Bronx goes wire to wire. They seem to be really heating up, and Fenton is now sitting at 4-2 along with a couple other teams. I do think that team will be just fine. We know how good they are, and fortunately just kind of ran into a buzzsaw with the Bronx scoring 49 points this week. Finally, we'll be moving on from the matchup minute and down to our standing segment. We have just 4 groups of records here. Things have tightened up a lot. The first few weeks, as I kind of mentioned in the intro, we had a a couple teams at the top, maybe 3 teams at the top. It is now 6 teams tied in record at the top. So, of course, just as a reminder, if a team is ahead of another in these rankings, that is because the total points they scored on the season are higher. Those total points really do matter. It is, obviously, first thing is those matchups. We need to know who wins the matchups, but beyond that, total points really do matter. So I think the teams we're going to continue to see the teams that are able to rack up more total points are going to work their way further and further up the leaderboards. And we do, of course, see that with ever the points leader, the North Pole Natty Bows. They are in first place at 4-2. Fenton, not far behind them in the second place. Washington State Winners, our reigning champion, are in third place with the Real Survivors in fourth. Arizona Asphalt in 5th, and the Soul Sovereigns, who rounds out the group of 4-2, are in 6th place. Opening up our second group of people at 500 this time at 3-3, Portland Pioneers at number 7. The Valley Gift Lords are in 8th place, with Cuyahoga Black Panthers following them in 9th, and Southwest Rabid Coyotes in 10th. Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes, that would be. St. Petersburg and the Bronx both sit at 2 and 4 at 11th and 12th place respectively. A couple of teams that, as we know, had a bit of tough starts to the season, but in general have turned things around as of late. Although, of course, we did see a loss from St. Petersburg this week, but they seem to be on the up and up, as do the Bronx, as I mentioned earlier. And 2 teams at the bottom of the leaderboards at 13th and 14th. We have the Joinville Friendly Capybaras and the Sault Ste. Marie Locks, each at 1 and 5. Those are your standings for the week. Let's move on down to bench blunders. Jaron Duran scored 12 points on Saturday for St. Pete. He was our number 3 bench blunder. Number 2 will be Bryce Matthews, but it's kind of 2A and 2B because he scored 12 points, not only on Tuesday, but also on Saturday for the Asphalt. And finally, Chase DeLauder, newly acquired Sault Ste. Marie Lock, did score 13 points on Friday. Just one bench blunder for the pitchers, but it is a matchup deciding bench blunder. Now, I know for a fact that this one was on purpose, if you will. So I know that Mike did sit Luis Severino on purpose to sort of budget starts, but when you lose by 8 points, we're going to have to point it out. We're going to especially have to point it out when he scores 36 points. He did that on Wednesday. And, just for perspective, if we do sort of look back on Wednesday, some of the other guys, obviously, that Mike started did not, unfortunately, have those 36 points. Just diving a little bit. George Kirby scored just 14. J.R. Ritchie with just 12. Sugano, obviously, with 20. And Gavin Williams was the only guy who outscored him there. So, really, if Severino had been switched out for any one of those guys, the winners would not have had that unfortunate comeback happen to them on Sunday. So that is definitely one of our more brutal bench blunders for the year. I am sorry, Mike, to harp on it a little bit. I know I've hit you with a Bassett and a matchup losing bench blunder. You can cry tears onto your trophy from last year. Your proverbial trophy, I should say. No, I kid. But yes, obviously, a tough one there for the winners. Sliding down to the claims corner, I am quickly just going to go over, I'm changing things up a little bit. It was too much so I started obviously by saying everything, and then I cut it down a little bit to just the bigger ones. So if it was above like 3, there are still just so many claims to go through. So really, I'm looking at claims 10 or above, or ones that had a lot of bids on them. So kind of just a chance to look at those. Carlos Cortez was our first name. Obviously, he had an unbelievable week last week for the Athletics. And Al Martinet decided that he should be a member of the Gift Lords and bid $50 on him. That was, unfortunately for Al Martinet, though uncontested. So a big bid that maybe didn't need to be as big as it was. Angel Martinez went for $42 to the Bandoleros. Soul Sovereigns bid $11 on him, and Portland bid $4. But of course, the 42 would end up taking the cake for the Bandoleros. Peter Lambert was a highly sought-after name in the relief market. He went for $27 to the Sovereigns. The Bronx bid $18, North Pole bid $15, and the Real Survivors bid $11 on him. Colin Rea with an uncontested $21 went to the Sovereigns. Devin Williams, for 67 went to the Portland Pioneers. Devin Williams, another highly sought-after name. The Bandoleros bid 43 on him. North Pole bid 42, and the Real Survivors bid 31. But, of course, the 67 would have him on Portland. This one does hurt, Mike. I promise this is the last time, buddy. But Andrew Kittredge for $20, $1 of FAAB for each negative point he did have on that Sunday. And he has since been dropped, very understandably, by Mike. On our Thursday window, things were a little bit quieter. John King went for $12 to Cuyahoga. Gordon Graceffa went for $11 to the Real Survivors. Arizona Asphalt bid $5 on him as well, but of course lost out to Min in the Arctic. Brad Lord for $11 to Sault Ste. Marie. Yainer Diaz for an uncontested $21 went to the Portland Pioneers. And Jose Caballero went for $55 to the Arizona Asphalt. Southwest Kansas bid $25 on him, and Portland bid $10, but he would find his way to Arizona as their new utility infielder. Let's dive into the transaction tracker. We had a number of trades this week, although no really huge ones. Although this number 5 one is a pretty big name. Yeah, there's some pretty big names in that one, so that's pretty fun. But not trade mania, I guess I should say. Let's just dive into the transactions and talk about them. Arizona traded the Real Survivors 2027 third-round pick over to St. Pete for Dominic Canzone. Arizona then traded Sault Ste. Marie's 2027 fourth-round pick for Miguel Sime. Sime? I can't remember. He is Washington's number 16 ranked prospect and considered quite a riser in the prospect world. Some people have been writing about him as somebody who could be, approaching some of those lists soon. We saw our first loan on the season. Bronx Bandoleros loaned Garrett Mitchell over to Portland at a rate of $5 per week. So JMC sent him over to me. I sent over $30 as sort of collateral. And then our loan deal says that when Jackson Churio is back from his injury, I'll send Garrett Mitchell back over for my FAB, and obviously with the amount paid to JMC taken out of there. The Real Survivors traded Joinville's 2027 second-round pick to Sault Ste. Marie for Merrill Kelly, who, of course, was an ever-reliable SP in the Washington State Winners title quest last year. The pretty big one we do have here is Sault Ste. Marie, who traded Foster Griffin and Alec Burleson over to the Washington State Winners for Chase DeLauder, Ben Brown, and Trey Morgan, who ranks as Tampa Bay's number 18 prospect. This is, I think, the trade where we see the biggest names move. Obviously, Burleson and DeLauder, two, reliable, steady power bats. DeLauder is kind of that young guy. Obviously, got off to that unbelievable start to the season, and does look like Mike is kind of selling high on the product there, and getting back a nice young starter in Foster Griffin and a reliable bat in Alec Burleson. I do really like this move for Sault Ste. Marie as well. I think for their window, Chase DeLauder fits things much better with, how young he is. Ben Brown, who was later flipped, obviously for a future asset as well. And then Trey Morgan, a prospect. So I do think that this fits their window nicely. And, CDL is a big name. He has put up some big numbers already. And I think he will continue to do that for his career on the Locks. The Arctic Real Survivors traded Luis Severino to Washington State for a 2029 third. Unfortunately, Severino, of course, was then sat that day, as we mentioned earlier. Sault Ste. Marie sent David Peterson over to Washington State for Brian Bayo. I am going to take this chance now because this trade is going to come up a lot. I would like to issue a formal apology to Mike. Brian Bayo, coming off his second start of the season, was generating more whiffs than we'd ever seen. The longstanding thought in Red Sox land is this guy is great at putting the ball on the ground, and especially when he tries to put the ball on the ground, that's great. What he is missing is that real swing and miss stuff when he really needs it, and he really looked like he had it through those first two starts, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, we might finally be seeing the real Brian Bayo, the one we've all been counting on. Mike did ask me, he said, what do you think of Brian Bayo? Told him all that. Unfortunately, Bayo completely fell off the cliff after that, being included in a trade along with Brian Reynolds and then Devin Williams, who was dropped by Washington State. That is a tough package in total to receive back for Cody Bellinger. So blame me for Brian Bayo making his way to the Washington State winners, but Washington State has shipped him out over to Sault Ste. Marie, who will be hoping on a little bit of that bounce back that maybe we saw earlier in the season. Arizona sent a 2027 second over to the Bandoleros for Connor Prelip, and Arizona's 2027 third. So just a little bit of a sort of pick swap there. And then obviously Bandoleros giving up Prelip as well. The Real Survivors traded Kevin Kelly to the Washington State winners for Cuyahoga's 2028 second. Cuyahoga traded John King and Matthew Libertor over to Sault Ste. Marie for Zach Gallen and Bronx Bandoleros 2028 third round pick. Interesting to see Gallen already on the move. Obviously, he was one of the centerpieces of the Hunter Green deal earlier in the year. Reese Olson, along with Zach Gallen, went with, I believe, a first round pick for Hunter Green. So, Sault Ste. Marie kind of flips him for John King, who's a nice arm out of the bullpen, and Matthew Libertor, who's been relatively steady early on in the year for the Cards, and of course we know has that prospect upside that you can kind of hope on. And our final trade for the week, I mentioned it earlier, Ben Brown went over to the Bronx Bandoleros for a 2027 second from Sault Ste. Marie. A lot of picks traded in this week, and it had me all week thinking of sort of a mantra that Greg Kaplan, who is a New York Rangers podcaster, he talks a lot about in the NHL how when you acquire a draft pick, yes, you are acquiring the opportunity to draft a player, but you're also acquiring an asset. And I think that that's a really important way to look at draft picks. That yes, they are very valuable for drafting players. Like I am not downplaying that at all. But they are also really valuable as trade assets. I can speak to this from my own perspective this year. Over the offseason, I traded two first-round picks. I traded for two first-round picks. Pardon me. Actually, 3 first-round picks. And I have since flipped 2 of them. In those 2 deals, I got back Hunter Green and I got back Corbin Carroll. So when we see people acquiring all these picks, I think I am often kind of wondering, how are these picks going to be used? Will they be sort of to replenish a quiet farm system, as you know, the Real Survivors maybe have, obviously coming in as an expansion team, it wasn't as easy to get some of those top end prospect type guys, or will they be flipped later on to sort of be used for other deals? So I just think it's really interesting to keep in mind with picks that yes, they are the opportunity to draft a player, but they're also a currency that can kind of be used in trades. So as there are all these trades with picks, I'm always thinking about that, and it is kind of fun to track them along and see how everything is going with the picks. Finally, let's close things out looking at next week's notes. We will lead off our preview by looking at Cuyahoga versus Portland. They are both coming into the week at 3-3 and will be our first matchup. Arizona Asphalt will be taking on the Arctic Real Survivors, another set of teams whose records match at 4-2 each. That should be a bit of a slugfest there for those 2 teams at the top of the league. Bandoleros at 2-4 and Seoul at 4-2 have inverse records. That is going to be a really fun matchup to watch. There are a lot of good matchups this week. I just want to head that off before I get too much further in. Obviously, Bandoleros kind of heating up as they are, and Seoul with that group at the top of the league has been really great so far. North Pole versus Fenton, another great matchup. As I was kind of going through this, all of these, I was like, ooh, that could be a great one for the headliner. Ooh, that could be a great one for the headliner. Ooh, that could be they're all great matchups this week. It's going to be a really fun recap next week. North Pole versus Fenton should be an absolute slugfest. It's going to be really interesting to see how that one turns out. Sault Ste. Marie and Joinville face off against one another. Both teams obviously at 1-5. So this is the battle to move out of the bottom spot. 2 teams at 1-5, looking to potentially start a winning streak, or maybe if it comes to that time, maybe not being too sad that you do tally a loss and get a little bit closer to that first overall pick. And then, of course, we have the Valley Gift Lords taking on the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes. Those teams' records match as well at 3-3 each. But was there anywhere else I could really go? A finals rematch as the Washington State winners take on the St. Petersburg Tropopologists. Washington State at 4-2 and St. Pete at 2-4. It should be a great matchup. Both teams, unfortunately, coming off of a loss for them, and likely to bounce back next week. Something I have been noticing is that if a team really underperforms, it's often because their starts didn't line up well. So, when a team maybe has a tough loss like St. Pete had this week, I think we could see them rebound really well with some nice starts. And of course, we know who Washington State is. So that should be a lot of fun to just keep an eye on. I'm looking forward to all these matchups. I'll just be completely honest. They all look fantastic. They're either matching records, so it's kind of a battle for who overtakes who. They are, teams at the bottom, teams at the top, teams with inverse records, rematches from the finals. It should all be a lot of fun. And we are looking forward to recapping it all with you next week. Have a good one, everybody.
Do you know what that makes you, Larry?
Lollygaggers.
Lollygaggers.